All right, we're going to get started. Thank you, Tawfiq. Thank you, Techwadi. I'm so excited to be moderating this session. To introduce myself, my name is Mary Nazzal. I'm an activist turned lawyer, turned social entrepreneur, turned impact investor. Today on our panel, we have some very dear friends of mine, women who I really admire, coming from different backgrounds. Thank you guys for joining us. And thank you to Techwadi for allowing me to curate a social impact panel. And thank you to the opening session on VC and MENA for already setting the stage for me, talking about gender lens investing, talking about inclusion, talking about impact. Even I heard Mr. Sawaris talk about the social enterprise model. So already the tone has been set. So let me extend a warm welcome to my panelists, dear friends, and happy birthday again to Amber. We have with us, wearing the lilac cashmere SEP scarf, Roberta Ventura, a dear friend, mentor, advisor, inspiration to me for many, many years, I think almost a decade now. She is the CEO and founder of SEP Jordan. And we have Ambar Amleh calling in from occupied Palestine. She's a managing partner of the Ibtikar Fund in Palestine, and Lianne Manna, also a dear friend, who's the co-founder of Impact Hub Amman. So welcome all of you to this amazing panel. So maybe just the Techwadi folks can tell me if I have till 5:45 or I have till 6, because I thought I had till 6 p.m. just so I can frame, the questions and how much time we have. So we're going to start with a very general question, which is, what does social impact mean to each one of you? And how does that definition translate into your work? So maybe we can start with Roberta. And can I just invite Amber just to mute yourself? And I'm going to mute myself as well so we can hear Roberta speak clearly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mary, for this exciting question. Straight to the point. Well, we are a social enterprise at SEP. We have a very clear mission, which is to bring thousands of refugees above the poverty line thanks to their skill and talent. Very straightforward. So this is kind of self-explanatory. It tells you how we, as a social enterprise, evaluate our social impact. We're also a B corporation, and along with all the other 3,000 B Corps around the world, we're basically pushing for change using business as a force for good by pursuing purpose as well as profit. This is really the whole point of being a B corporation. So the social impact is embedded in our business model. I'm going to keep it very general so that there's enough time for everyone to say what they see as social impact, if that's okay with you, Mary.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Amber, please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. By definition, Ibtikar is not a social impact fund. However, given what we do and where we do it specifically, we are by default an impact fund. We as Ibtikar have invested in over 26 tech startups in Palestine. Those have created hundreds of jobs, mostly for youth under 30. About 50% of them are held by youth, and about 30% of them are held by women. And 40% of our founders are women. And these are numbers that are much better than even some of the West, certainly the West, actually. We've attracted millions of dollars of foreign direct investment to Palestine. And so, I think that when we think of social impact, it's really about being conscious that the repercussions of your work, it's thinking holistically of where you live and who you affect. And it's really understanding that business should no longer be only about the bottom line, that we need to think about being good global citizens and understanding what it is that our work impacts and who it impacts all around the world.
That's amazing. You articulate it so well. Lianne?
First of all, thank you for such an amazing space. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. If I were to just add on what my fellow panelists have said, to me, social impact is really playing my part as someone who benefits from the system or systems or ecosystems. And in its simplest form, it's the idea of creating value and trying to bring about positive change. So I've had the pleasure of onboarding Impact Hub, soon to be Impact Hub Amman, in 2020. And it's part of the Global Impact Hub network, which hosts over 16,000 change makers from around the world, whether entrepreneurs or creatives or thinkers or investors. There's an Impact Hub present in over 100 cities across the globe. So the Impact Hub experience really focuses on three main pillars, and that is the physical and virtual space to work, meet, and connect, as well as support services in the form of content, programs, events, access to global and local resources and opportunities, and finally, focusing very much on a locally rooted and globally connected network of change makers.
That's amazing. Thank you. And I'm honored to be an advisor to Impact Hub. But Lianne, I just sort of understand a bit more about you as someone who I think really represents a true social entrepreneur in the sense that you have sort of this wide way of thinking. Can you just tell the audience a little bit about your experience in entrepreneurship and in particular green entrepreneurship?
Thank you so much, Mary. And you have been an amazing advisor, mentor, friend, and we really can't thank you enough. It's such a pleasure to learn from you. So I began to consciously think about social impact when I realized my personal influence. And I really believe that everyone has personal influence. And to an extent, that can be a double-edged sword, because really whatever we do influences the people, the things around us in one way, shape, or form. But the social impact or positive change really starts when we use that power to consciously inflict about positive change. So as soon as I transitioned from being a student at university to stepping into the career world, I knew I wanted to direct my efforts towards impact. And in 2018, I founded ECO, which is a social startup that works to tackle and alleviate food waste in Jordan. And since then, we great experience of getting incubated at Injaz is my startup, which is a business incubator that has a focus on green startups. And since then we've grown, and I've had also through that experience the pleasure of meeting who are now my partners at Impact Hub Amman. So it's all been such a beautifully interconnected experience thus far.
Much for sharing. I'm going to jump to Roberta in a second because I hear a little bit about the story of what brought you to, creating SEP and building the business and then ultimately getting it certified as a B Corp. But I just want to sort of answer my own question as an impact investor. So Amber said, she's not an impact investor, but she's had very clear impact working in geography, which is largely dysfunctional, within occupied Palestine. For me, impact fund management as 17 Ventures recently, so recently coming into the space, but we very clearly have an impact objective in mind. So with the first fund that we designed, which is called the SEP Jordan Growth and Impact Fund, the impact that we wanted to achieve was very clearly built into the investment model. So we developed a proprietary scorecard called the SDG Inclusion Scorecard. So 17 is based on the 17 SDGs. We use this as a map. So we integrate the scorecard throughout the process, from screening throughout the investment into exit until exit. And we also have developed something interesting called the SDG carry, or the social carry. So instead of the typical sort of financial return that most private equity funds get, we also have allocated some points of that carry to the social impact. So, this goes back to the point of how can you be incentivizing asset managers on the impact side as well as the financial side. And I think, something that Amber mentioned, that, we can't just be doing business as usual anymore. We can't be investing as usual anymore. And I think in 2021, we can see with the environmental degradation that we have caused and the social inequity that exists and the existing poverty that remains, that we have to change the way we do business, and we have to do it quickly. So going back to you, Roberta, if you can just tell us a little bit about your journey, and really take more time, because I want people to be taken to, the camp where you saw decades of just charity, and an existence, an undignified existence of refugees living in this camp. You know, just tell us the story of how it happened. I want people.
Okay, yes, I will. So yeah, as my name says, I'm Italian. And so I don't come from the region, but I've always had a passion for the region since I was a child. When it came to my graduation thesis at Milan Bocconi University, I chose to move to Beirut to work on my thesis, which was on the reconstruction of Beirut after the civil war and Solidaire. And that's where I first visited a refugee camp, Ain El Helwe. And that stayed with me forever. And that really motivated me to, at some point, come back and try and make a difference. But also it was the starting point for me. It was 1997. And since then, I have watched refugee camps in the region very closely as a donor, because then I went on to developing a career in finance. So for 20 years, I worked in the city of London as a stockbroker, and then in Geneva as a hedge fund manager. I was a portfolio manager in a global equities hedge fund. So over those 20 years, I became like a donor observing situation in the camp. And what I could see is all the camps I was looking at and kind of donating to, the situation was actually getting worse by the day rather than better. By situation, I mean the way of living, the clinical depression. Clinical depression, I'm sure most of you know, is the most commonly diagnosed illness across refugee camps. So I basically came to the conclusion a few years ago, it was in 2013, so about 7-8 years ago, that just donating to NGOs was no longer sufficient. It's actually very simple. The whole no-profit system has a huge role to play when it comes to emergency. But when you look at refugee camps as they existed for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, this is no longer an emergency. This is a new status quo. It's a new normal. And therefore, the normal rules of market should apply. So my conviction is that refugees should be considered as active economic agents, just like everybody else, and not just recipients of donations. And my biggest problem was that no one seemed to be looking at it that way. So when in 2013, I came to Jordan and I was advising an NGO who were working on an after-school program in Jarash camp in the north of Jordan, also known as Gaza camp, because it was created in 1968 after the 1967 war. The situation was dramatic. Everybody I met at the camp told me that they just wanted dignity and work. Honestly, nobody wanted anything else but dignity and work. So that kind of set me thinking, and I felt a personal responsibility coming from the private sector, having for 20 years studied and invested in companies across all the sectors. I actually know the private sector not only as a responsibility, but also a great opportunity to play an active role in changing things. So I decided that just because no one else was doing it, I was going to have to do it. So we created the first company, which was active in Gaza camp, and you, Mary, were involved since day one, really. Presenting the whole project as a peer-to-peer, colleague-to-colleague to the community at the camp and to those who had the skill and talent to participate. Because, well, of course, what we do is embroidery. That's our focus. Our core business is hand embroidery. And some of you may smile because it seems like such an old thing to focus on, such a non-technological or sexy thing to focus on. In reality, embroidery, you told me I could get going. You're never going to be able to stop me, Mary. I'm going to wrap it. No, but embroidery really, first of all, is a skill and a talent which not everybody can develop. It requires certain parts of the brain, which not all of us have to the level needed. I don't, for example. I'm hopeless. Two, it has a therapeutical impact, huge therapeutical value. You focus on your work, you count your stitches, and you don't think about anything else. Your mind is empty, akin to meditation. This is huge. And three, it cannot be disintermediated by machines because a machine made embroidery shows it's made by a machine, very simply because machines don't have emotions, whereas the artists who embroider do, and they pour their emotions in their work. So yeah, I saw the grounds to create a real company and a real brand, which is becoming and needs to become a global household name, so that we can fulfill our mission of bringing thousands of refugees above the poverty line.
Can you just one additional point before I move to Amber, and want to hear the story of Ibtikar and where you are today and what challenges you may be facing, what support you need. So just think about that. Roberta, in the beginning, you mentioned that SEP Jordan is now a B Corp. I think those of us within the impact space understand what a B Corp is, but maybe some participants here don't know. Can you just tell us very briefly what a B Corp stands for and how you got that certification?
Yeah, the B stands for benefit, and it's really a group of companies which do put purpose on the same level as profit. So it's companies who are conscious of their impact on society and on environment. What's maybe interesting is that over 150,000 have applied over the years to become a B Corp, and only 3,000 are B Corps, because it's actually a very, very thorough and painful process. It's a very in-depth audit that the B Corp institution goes through. So basically they really get into the company, they analyze every aspect, they have full open books, and they score the company against several it's a whole matrix approach. And to be certified, you have to have at least 80. Usually small companies struggle to get to these 80 points. And then it's a very well organized system, because then every 3 years when you review your certification, you have an incentive in improving further your impact, whether it's environmental or social, and get a higher and higher score. Now, you will all have heard of companies like Patagonia or Allbirds. These are also B Corps. And there are B Corps across all sectors. And it's really a big global effort to try and lobby as much as possible for change, i.e. for corporates to be really conscious of the impact of all of their business decisions.
That's super helpful. And there was a question by Ghadir who was asking, what are some tools or strategies to use to ensure that a company's impact scales proportionally to one's business? I actually think that having the B Corp certification almost ensures that the two flow in parallel. Thank you, Roberta. Amber, moving to you. You spoke very briefly about what social impact means to you at Ibtikar, but I'd really love you to sort of take us through the journey and where you are today.
Sure, and it actually leads very well from what Roberta was saying about the dignity of work and the ability to do this in a way that is private sector led. So, our ecosystem, our tech ecosystem for years was donor led. So it was USAID, it was the Europeans, the World Bank, et cetera, funding startups and funding the support systems around startups. So whether incubators or accelerators. And so what that led to was a completely misaligned results orientation. So the donors wanted, very quick results. They wanted to know how many jobs did you create, in the next 3 years. And they weren't concerned about that long-term sustainability needed for a startup to thrive. And so we were sort of constantly at odds, and we had to, put 10 startups through an accelerator in a year, and these hefty goals that weren't really what we should be after. And so we, as Ibtikar, then decided to involve the private sector, and it had to be the private sector because we wanted that knowledge and we wanted that long-term prospect and that money to come into startups and support startups. We created Ibtikar 1 in 2016. And it's a $10 million fund. And we are now in May finishing our investment period. So we're currently raising our second fund, which will be bigger. It's actually $25 to $30 million target, because we are very bullish about what we're seeing, not only in Palestine, but also in our diaspora. So we're able to invest in Palestinians in Jordan and throughout the MENA region, and be able to attract some of that knowledge that our diaspora has around the world to Palestine and creating jobs here. So, we talked a bit about our results, but we're very excited that we are nearing our first close of probably by the next month, but we will continue fundraising. So if anyone out there is looking to invest in Palestine, we are open to talk. Finally, what we do and what do we invest in? So tech startups, because of all of those challenges imposed by the occupation of imports and exports and movement of goods and people, the tech sector remains one that is relatively free. So we are able to establish businesses like, for example, Mashvisor, which is a company that provides data for real estate investors in the US, all of it from Palestine. So it's incredible. They work in 2 shifts. In the morning, the developers and the marketers come in the evening, it's the salespeople calling their real estate investors in the US. They broke even last year. They're raising a huge Series A from the US market. And again, all of it from Palestine. And so we've proven that it's possible, and we're ready and excited to continue to build on that momentum with Fund 2.
That's amazing. So if anyone is interested to hear more about Ibtikar, go ahead with Amber on her social media, her LinkedIn. Hi, Heather. Great to see you here. I loved your intervention this morning. Lianne, Amber said something interesting about sort of, this donor attitude towards accelerators and incubators and, checklists and targets, no sort of long-term vision. So, you're setting up Impact Hub Amman, which is great. It's part of a local network. But can you explain to us, how is it going to be different to all the existing ventures that you see in town? How can we ensure that this entrepreneurial sort of spirit and impact mindset doesn't remain an elitist West Amman thing? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Of course, that's a very, very good question. So when we onboarded Impact Hub Amman, we observed a gap, a disconnect between the growing entrepreneurship ecosystem that's really very much focused on West Amman, as you have mentioned, and communities outside West Amman. So whether we're talking East Amman or governorates. And we feel like, although there is support targeting such marginalized communities, it fails to often address their complete inclusion into the growing entrepreneurship ecosystem. So what we aim to do is really focus on community building from the perspective of inclusion and diversity, and really mimic what society is all about. So having the entrepreneurs, the creatives, the investors from the East, the West, the North, the South, women, men, refugees, people with disabilities, and to really host them and foster the notions of co-creation and collaboration. And there's actually a very cool question here in the chat box, which I'd like to build on, which is, how can social expectations impact our identities, by Ali Said? And, gaps often lie in our perception and in our thoughts, and assumptions and stereotypes can really limit people to specific boxes. Stepping outside of that and really merging as one can very much help dismantle such stereotypes and help move forward with collaboration in mind, and therefore maximizing real value creation.
As Ali said, thank you for your question. Nice to see you here. Okay, maybe Amber, while I'm talking to Roberta, you can just read that question from Jafar. Roberta, I sort of want to speak specifically about the social impact activities that SEP does, because we need to see, how does a social enterprise or a B Corp actually look different to a typical business? So I just want you to just sort of take us through the academy and all that kind of stuff that you.
Yep, absolutely. Now, first of all, really, the first step is, it's about going above the poverty line. So the first key thing is paying people fairly. So employees are paid a multiple, or anyway much more than minimum salary, and the ladies who do embroidery are paid a 50% premium to market prices, but more importantly, they get paid for their work on a weekly basis upon passing quality control. So there is absolute clarity, total visibility, no room for panic or negotiation. The financial aspect is very clear to everybody in the team. We work with 517 embroidery artists today, and all 517 know exactly when they're going to finish the work, how much they will get paid. And they're very happy with that, which is why they keep coming back and they keep asking for more. So that's definitely the first step. But then, of course, as a social enterprise, since day one, even though we were not yet making profits, we started investing at the camp within the community as if we were making profits, because for us it was as important to build a brand at the camp as it is to build a brand outside of the camp. So we created, first of all, an academy. At the academy, we train, so every embroidery artist who comes, knocks on our door, they already know how to embroider, but they have to undergo a training so that they can get up to the standards required. And really, they are the highest international standards. But once we had that set up, at the academy, we started organizing also all sorts of courses, which the ladies were asking for. So typically, we've been asked for domestic violence, nutrition, first aid, English language. This would be the top 4 priorities for them or for their kids. First aid, there is no hospital at the camp, so we actually regularly host the Jordan Paramedic Society, who are training from teenagers to SEP ladies on how to react in first aid situations. They could save lives at the camp in the absence of trained paramedic personnel. English language, we hold classes 3 times a week for children, once a week for the mothers, which are held by an English teacher from the camp. So again, it's all community-based and it's all managed locally by locals. And that is also, I think, what makes us different from any other similar ventures. So we organize these activities. Then this was already in place, and the ladies were asking more and more for help with their smaller kids, because on average, a SEP artist has between 7 and 9 children of all ages, and a lot of them are preschoolers, and they're all saying the same thing. I'm worried for my child, because even when he's going to get to school, it's going to be 50 students to 1 teacher, and this is their main worry, education for their kids. So we have created a cultural center, which is now ready, which is 50 meters away from our workshop, and which we hope to start once the lockdown is over, where we're going to host activities for preschoolers on the ground floor. And on the first floor, we're going to have a big...
She just froze there, so I'm going to keep going until her internet comes back. Lianne and Amber, you can hear me, right? Just one point I want to make as Roberta is frozen is, as she's describing sort of the social impact activities and the business of SEP Jordan generally, I just think it's important to remind the audience that this social enterprise is operating in the poorest refugee camp in Jordan. So this isn't like, you know, a shop down the street from my house that can function. This is a business, a social enterprise that is in one of the most populated camps, where you have no sewage lines, you don't have proper roofs. I mean, there's multiple challenges that has faced Roberta as the founder of this company and the women. And this is where we need to be focusing our efforts. You know, they talk about impact investment and driving capital to where it needs to go. Impact capital isn't going to where it needs to go. And this is really what we need to be looking at. And this is what we are trying to also do as 17 Ventures, is start driving capital towards the SDGs and other vulnerable areas. And one impact fund that I'm managing at the moment is a refugee lens fund that is looking to actively deploy capital in refugee lens investments, like SEP, you know, initiatives that are founded by refugees or managed by refugees or hire refugees or service refugees. So this is what we really need to be thinking about if we want to take impact investments to another level. Amber, I want to just stick on this subject of challenges. I mean, like I mentioned before, you're operating within occupied Palestine. It's a difficult landscape. We have a lot of restrictions by the Zionist occupation and so on. Can you speak to 2 things? Because I know we're supposed to be rounding up this panel. One, the challenges, but two, how you see yourself and Ibtikar Fund optimizing your impact on the ground generally. So challenges and what you need to take it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, we in terms of challenges, I mentioned earlier that the majority of those that are sort of logistical and day-to-day are because of the occupation. And so, for example, it is very difficult for us to import anything into Palestine. It is very difficult for us to export anything out of Palestine. And so, that takes out hardware. It takes out, anything that uses electronic devices, which are even more scrutinized by the Israelis. And so it makes it very difficult. Tech, on the other hand, is borderless at this point. And so we're able to create great products for the region and the world from anywhere in the West Bank and Gaza. During the war in Gaza, we had entrepreneurs connecting from their cars using the batteries in their cars. The resilience that we have seen in Palestinians and entrepreneurs is incredible, and I think that is something that is likely unmatched in many parts of the world. Is unlikely matched. I said it right the first time. Likely unmatched. All right, and so we hang on to that because it is impossible not to support this optimism. These young men and women that are building great companies and wanting to do it from Palestine, they all understand very, very well. And trust me, they can all do what they're doing in Palestine from anywhere else in the world, but they want to do it from here. And they want to create jobs here. And they want to show that Palestine is ripe for investment and that a company, the next exit for MENA can actually come from Palestine. And so for that, we actually need support from investors and partners all over the region. And that is actually something it's a barrier that we continue to try and break down because there are so many incorrect assumptions of what it means to do business in Palestine. There are so many incorrect assumptions of what it means to be a Palestinian entrepreneur expanding to the region that we're often at a disadvantage when being placed at the same level from other entrepreneurs in the region. And so we have to work with everyone in the region, and we have to think about it in a way that, they see us the same, and that'll change. And we're very hopeful, right? We are constantly establishing new partnerships and reaching out to people. And the more that these companies grow, the more impossible it'll become not to invest.
It's amazing. Thank you. Nadine wrote, "No resilience like Palestinian resilience." Indeed, 100%. Lianne, there's a question that came in through from Yasmin, which I think you can speak to because I feel like you really embody as a human sort of all this spirit. So she's asking about what does real value creation mean to you? So maybe you can speak to that. And also just sort of as a younger member of this panel, like where would you ideally like to see this scene, the impact scene, the social entrepreneurship scene be in 5 years? I know this isn't a question that we discussed before, but I'm so curious to hear sort of an optimistic vision and sort of get a sense of that. And then we'll come back to you, Roberta, for your final.
Awesome. So Yasmin, thank you for the question. Well, real value creation, if I were to be a little technical, as opposed to the conventional theory of what it is to create value for a company, stressing on shareholder value specifically, real value creation in this sense takes into account holistic stakeholder value, meaning just partners to clients to any really stakeholder and coming in together to identify and define what value looks like. And in my opinion, one of the greatest tools out there to really define value is the triple bottom line, which takes into account people, planet, and profit, and allows a fair assessment to ensure that happens proportionally across all three levels. And if I were to just express quickly what my vision for Jordan and the world is moving forward, it's really just seeing focus on youth empowerment and for youth to really act as the driving agent for change. And that I strongly believe stems from a deep acknowledgement of each person's personal influence and the ability to really bring about that change. So a shift in mindset, I think, is the prerequisite to the change that shall follow.
I totally agree with you. I mean, we have a youth population that largely feels marginalized, unheard, and they feel that they lack an agency. And I think that that has led to the sense of, you know, complacency and depoliticization that you see. And sort of, this is actually the biggest challenge that I think we are facing in our region. So spot on, 100%. Okay, Roberta, some final words from you. There were 2 points that I wanted you to speak to, which Amber addressed as well, sort of challenges, you know, and I did speak a little bit about the environment in which you're operating and what you would need to optimize your impact. You said you want SEP to be a brand, you know, that everyone can recognize globally, but what do you actually need to make that happen?
Yep, okay, wow. Great to be back, by the way. So the big network meltdown. So I would say, well, the challenges we can look at in 3 different ways. One, there's the obvious one. Life at the camp has become a lot harder with COVID than what it was before. For the ladies we work with, for their husbands, for their families, it's a nightmare. It's really hell. They're all saying, we wish we could go back to the wonderful life we had before COVID. That's how bad it actually is. So everything is a bit more challenging. Also in terms of stability, which allows you to kind of get to work. The second is transport, logistics, procurement, everything has become a lot more cumbersome, courtesy of COVID as well. Now, I think we could overcome the first 2 challenges if we could succeed on the third one, which is to get it right and get this brand to go viral, so to say, to go global. Because at the end of the day, the solution to a lot of the problems we're facing would be bigger and bigger volumes. The more volumes we have, the more the 517 ladies will feel like they are using the time that they wish to put onto this effectively. They will have a ripple effect on the families and on their community, and we can keep training hundreds of artists every year. We could potentially, within a couple of years, work with 3,000 ladies only in Jerash camp, produce more than 100,000 pieces a year, and be a more than $10 million company with most of those 3,000, if not all of them, above the poverty line. For this to happen, we need to get the whole brand identity and recognition globally right.
You're well on your way to that. We have 2 more minutes for the panel, but there is a question by Marwan Abdulhamid, who's an amazing founder as well of Grow Home. I think he's also participating in Techwadi. He's asking, is it reasonable for a social impact-driven company to seek an exit at some point? Has this ever happened before? Can it happen in Palestine? Amber, would you like to try and take that on? And then maybe Roberta?
Yes, sure. I was actually about to chat. So Marwan, I think absolutely. I think that it's about thinking about that triple bottom line that Lianne was talking about, right? It's not only about the social impact that you might be having, but it's about thinking about how you can do that sustainably and even profitably, which it is possible. And so, you know, I don't see why a social impact enterprise cannot exit. I think there are probably examples, Mary, you probably know better, but, you know, Roberta mentioned Allbirds and Patagonia and some very huge companies that certainly are thinking about all of these bottom lines, you know, very in depth and much more than maybe many of us are.
Roberta?
Yeah, sure. I'm noticing more and more large established corporations realize that because of the pressure they're getting from investors, they need to work strategies which do include all three of the triple bottom line pillars, not just the traditional one. And so paradoxically, probably those social impact driven companies can bring a real value to an existing corporation which has a legacy, which does not have impact in its DNA, but needs to learn it from someone. And by incorporating a social enterprise, they'll be able to learn from it. So I can absolutely see that happening, and I actually hope it will happen.
Totally agree. So our time is up. I'm just going to add one point quickly. So for those of you who don't know, prior to getting into this space, I did actually build a business and align it with the SDGs. So more of a social business rather than a social enterprise. But I can tell you, making that transition from a very traditional business that didn't look at the triple bottom line to one that looked much more holistically at the business, I can tell you we did better after we started paying more attention to women. After we opened the daycare on site in our company, we had much less employee turnover. So generally, our bottom line, financial bottom line, did better after we started incorporating social impact into the company. So having said that, thank you to this wonderful panel. Thank you, Amber, Roberta, Lianne, for joining us. I think this was a very important discussion. And thank you to Techwadi for being so opening to having us do this. So take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Audience.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.